Begin the Gemara today on Daf Pei Beis Amud Aleph. We're holding where it says, the second line from the top, Avaloini Mucha. So we have to first review quickly here the Braise that was brought in the end of Pei Aleph Amud Beis, which the Gemara will now bring a few different interpretations how you learn that Braise. The Braise brought two cases. One case of the pieces of meat from a carbon chatos that there was a mixture of Tomei pieces with Tahir pieces. And the halach is, if it's 1 in 100, so usually it becomes bottle. But in the Reisha of the Braise it says that, so there's a machlokes in the Reisha. The Tanna Kama says that it becomes bottle, and Rabbi Yehuda says, Lo taled, it will not become bottle. Then you have the Seifa of the Braise. The Seifa of the Braise speaks also about a case of pieces of a carbon chatos, the meat, but there it didn't get mixed with Tomei, rather it got mixed with Chulin meat. And over there, the Tanna Kama as well says that it will not become bottle. So the reason why this Braise was brought here is because Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is that only if everybody, without exception, counts this, then it will not be bottle. But if some people count it, or if it's customary to count this, so then it's not going to be bottle. So that's why the Tanna Kama says that it won't be bottle. But Rish Lakish says that if most people count it, if it's customary to count it, it should not be bottle. So why does the Tanna Kama say that it will be bottle? So the Gemara explained that we're not talking about pieces of meat that are pieces, full pieces. We're talking about nimucha. Nimucha means it was either dissolved or was cut into little tiny pieces, so it doesn't have any chshivas anymore. So that if it doesn't have any chshivas, so that's why the Tanna Kama says that it's going to be bottle. Now Rabbi Yehuda in the Braise said that it will not be bottle. Lo tala. What was the reason? So the Gemara here says that Rabbi Yehuda follows his reasoning. He holds that min b'minoi loy bottle. Whenever you have two things that are the same min that are mixed with one another, it will never be bottle. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Okay, so now the Gemara will continue in discussion in this inyan, and it asks as follows. Avol, so now you just explained that according to Reish Lakish, what is the Braise speaking about? That the pieces of meat here are broken up, or they're dissolved, so they're not full pieces of meat, so they're not choshev. So loy nimucha, but that would mean though that if these pieces of meat were full pieces of meat and they were not broken up, samai, what would be the halacha? Loy tala. Then even the Tanna Kama would agree that it would not be bottled, because according to Rish Lakish, it has chshivas because it's customary to sell it by count. If so, the tani. So then why does it say in this Braise afterwards? Avol chaticha shel chatas tahira. In the Seifa of the Braise it says that if you have a piece of meat from the carbon that got mixed with 100 pieces of chulin, of tired pieces of chulin, loy ta'ale. So in the Seifa of the Braise, over there it says that even the Tanna Kama will agree that it will not become bottle. Why does he have to bring a new case to point out that here the Tanna Kama will agree that it will not be bottle? Niflaig v'nisni b'dida. Why does he not make a distinction regarding the very case itself that was brought in the Reisha? And it should say as follows. When does the Tanna Kama say that these pieces of meat that got mixed with one another become bottle? B'shenimucha. If it was broken up, it's not any more full pieces. So therefore, it has no chshivas, and it becomes bottle. But if it was not broken up and it's full pieces, so then leitala. So then it will not become bottle. Why? Because according to Rish Lakish, kol shedarkei limnois has chshivas and it does not become bottle. So why is the Tana bringing two different cases? In the Reisha, a case about Tomei and Tar that got mixed, and in the Seifa, a case of the carbon chatas with chulin that got mixed. Let him make a distinction regarding one case, Tomei and Tar, depending if the meat is one big piece or the meat is cut into different pieces. Then it's not choshev. Answers the Gemara, it could have made that distinction, but it wants to say a bigger chiddush. Tahayrais, b'tahayrais adaflei. For the Tana, he has an advantage in teaching the halacha of tahayrais b'tahayrais, which is two different pieces of meat that are both tahir. And still in the Seifa is telling you that they do not become bottled. There's a bigger chiddush to this. Why is it a bigger chiddush? Rashi brings from Mishnayos and Masechta Trumis, where over there you see that there's a bigger chiddush when you have tahayres b'tahayres. There's more of a svara that it should become bottle. And besides that, Rashi says that the chiddush over here is in the Seifa, even though we're talking about pieces of meat that were cut up and that dissolved, they're not any more big pieces. So I would think that it should become bottle. So the Tana and the Seifa wants to teach that there's a scenario that it still will not become bottle. So it's a bigger chiddush. That's why he teaches this. So Tahiris b'Tahiris adufle. That's the chiddush here. Frag the Gemara. Now going back to understanding the Braise itself. The Braise made a distinction between the Reisha and the Seifa. And the Reisha is talking about tahir meat that got mixed with tameh meat from a carbon. In the Seifa, it's talking about the meat from a carbon that got mixed with chulin. In the Reisha, the Tanakama said it will be bottle. In the Seifa, the Tanakama said it will not be bottle. What's the difference? So the Gemara now asks, so Reish Lakish, according to Reish Lakish, Ma'ishna Reisha or Ma'ishna Seifa. Why should there be any distinction between the Reisha and the Seifa? So Rashi explains that this is a question specifically on the opinion of Reish Lakish. Why? According to Rabbi Yechanan, this Braisa is speaking about full pieces of meat. If it's full pieces of meat, so then they certainly have some level of chshivas. According to Rabbi Yechanan, the real chshivas does not exist even by full pieces of meat, because not everybody sells it by count. Some people sell it by count, so it has some chshivas. So because it has some chshivas, but not the full chshivas of a davish b'minyan, so therefore, Rabbi Yechanan, we can understand what would be the distinction between the Reisha and the Seifa. What's the difference? So Rashi explained before, when you have tahir and tameh, they get mixed. If you're not going to say that it's bottle, what's going to happen? You're going to have to go and burn it all, because tameh kachim cannot be eaten by anybody. You're going to have to burn it. In the Seifa, though, where it says that there's meat that are tahir from a carbon that gets mixed with chulin, even if you're going to say it's not bottle, you're not going to have to burn it all. What are you going to do? A kayin could eat it. A Yisrael, a Zar, can't eat it, but a Kayin can eat it. So therefore, according to Rabbi Yechanan, there's a reason to be more machmer in the Seifa. Since the Kayin has an ability to eat it, so why should we be lenient and say that it becomes bottle? Let it, even if it's not bottle, let the Kayin eat it. There's not going to be much of a loss for this. It'll go to the Kayin. Whereas in the Reisha, because over there you're going to have to burn everything, so over there, we say that it's not fully choshev. This piece of meat that here is tameh is not so choshev, and therefore will become bottle. That's understood according to Rabbi Yechanan. But according to Reish Lakish, what is this Braisa speaking about? It's pieces of meat that were cut up into little pieces, or it's dissolved. There's no chshivas to it whatsoever. So if there's no chshivas to these pieces of meat whatsoever, there's no reason to make any distinction between the Reisha and the Seifa. In such a case, if there's no chshivas at all, it should always be bottle, whether in the Reisha, whether in the Seifa. What's the difference? That's the Gemara's question. So here the Gemara is going to bring three different pshatim for this. Rav Shesha Be'er Ravidi says the difference between the Reisha and the Seifa is Reisha betumas mashkin de Rabbanon. The Reisha that's speaking about tumah, what kind of a tumah is it speaking about? The meat became tumah through mashkin de Rabbanon. So there's a gzeirim de Rabbanon that liquids will make even a vessel tumah, and then anything that's inside that vessel will become tumah as well. Minat Torah, liquids cannot make a vessel tumah. But midrabanan it'll make the vessel tameh, and then the meat inside it will become tameh. So the Reisha of this Braisa was speaking about a tumeh midrabanan, and the Seifa, what is the Seifa speaking about? Dairaisa. The Seifa is speaking about a issue which is minat Torah. Why is it an issue minat Torah? Because in the Seifa we're talking about the meat of the carbon that gets mixed with the chulin meat, and that's an isser minat Torah for a zar to eat it because there's kachim, there's a carbon that's mixed in over here. So therefore, what the Gemara is saying, according to Rashi, the difference between the Reisha and the Seifa is the Tanakama holds that Rabbi Yehuda, the svara that Rabbi Yehuda said that min b'minoi will never be bottle. When you have two of the same type, they will never become bottle. So the Tanakama holds, when do I say that min b'minoi is not going to be bottle? Only when it's a mixture where there's an issa minat Torah. Then he agrees to Rabbi Yehuda. But if it's a mixture which is only midrabanan issue, because the whole tumah here is only midrabanan, then he disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda, and there he says min b'minoi will be bottle. That's the difference between the Reisha and the Seifa. So the Gemara asks on this teretz as well. Frag the Gemara. So if so, second, back inside the Gemara. Avol tumas sheretz. Now, so according to what you're saying, if in the Reisha it would be speaking also about a tumah minat Torah. If it was a tumah from a sheretz, what would be the halacha? Loy tala. So then even in the Reisha, you would agree that the Tanakama would agree that it would not be bottle. So the whole distinction is that the Reisha is speaking about a issue minat Rabbanon, and the Seifa is speaking about a issue minat Torah. So if so, the Tani Seifa, why does it have to bring this new halach in the Seifa of the case of Avol chaticha shel chatas tahirish and es ave b'mei chaticha shel chulin tahiris loy ta'ala? So the Seifa is bringing you an example of a new case. of Toir Kachim and Toir Chulin that got mixed with one another, that there it will not become bottle. Why does it have to bring a new case? It can make the same distinction regarding the very same case that it spoke about in the Reisha. And it could say as follows. When do I say in the Reisha that when there's a mixture of Tomei and Tahir that it becomes bottle, but Tumas Mashkin? Only with the Tumah of Mashkin, which is Midrabanan. See here, we're lenient, and even though it's Min B'minai, it'll become bottle. But if it's a Tumah Minatayre that's caused by a Sheretz, Loi. So over here, I do not have this leniency. Over here I say that min b'minoi will not be bottle. So instead of bringing up a new case in the Sefer, the whole distinction here is whether it's minat Torah or midrabanan, make the distinction regarding the same case. So again, the Gemara gives the same answer it said before. Tahira b'tahires adiflei. The Tana wants to bring a new case in the Sefer about tahir meat from a carbon with tahir meat from chulin that got mixed, because there's a bigger chiddush to say that it does not become bottle, as Rashi quoted before. We see in Mishnay's Trumas that is, that by tahiris there's more of a svara that it should be bottle. Another pshat to explain the difference between the Reisha and the Sefer of this Braisa. Rabba says, Reisha is salav. In the Reisha, when there's tamei meat of a carbon with tahir meat of a carbon that get mixed, what's the issa to eat this? The whole issa to eat this is only a issa of a lav. As Rashi here brings, that the basar of kachim that becomes tamei, so it's a basar sheyiga b'chol tamei, it's a lav that you're not allowed to eat it. That's all. So it's a lighter issa, so to speak. Seifa is issa kares. In the Seifa, it's speaking about the case of kachim mixing in with chulin. So if a person is going to go ahead and eat this, and he's not a kayin, and he has tumas haguf, and he eats this, he's going to be chayiv kares. So it's a much more severe, much more stringent isser. So therefore in the Sefer, because it's a much more stringent isser, we're more machmer and it won't be bottle. The Reisha, it's a lighter isser, only of a lav, there it would be bottle. That's the distinction. Fragt the Gemara, but how could you make this distinction? Rabbi said, Rabbi himself once said, Kol b'dayraisa, anytime you have any suffix regarding something that's minatayra, issa minatayra, loishna is a lav, loishna is a kares. It doesn't matter if the issa minatayra is the issa of a lav or it's the issa of a kares. If it's a issa minatayra, we treat it with the same stringency. We don't make such kind of distinctions. You can make a distinction between the issa minatayra and issa midrabanan, but not between a issa lav or a issa kares. So therefore, how could he say such an answer? And it says, the Gemara says, kasha. This remains a question on Rabbi, how he gave this answer. A third pshat the Gemara here says to explain the distinction between the Reisha and the Sefer. Again, the Reisha is speaking about Tomei and Toir meat that got mixed, and the Sefer is speaking about a meat from the carbon and Chulin meat that got mixed. Ravashi says, Sefer, the reason why the Sefer will more stringent and it will not become bottle, because in the Sefer, this meat is considered to be a davar sheyeshle matirin. Davar sheyeshle matirin is anytime you have an isser, which eventually will become allowed again. The typical example for that would be chametz on Pesach. After Pesach, the chametz of Pesach would be mutter again. So the halacha by davar sheyeshle matirin is v'chol davar sheyeshle matirin. Anytime you have an isser that got mixed into something which is mutter, and you want to know if it would be bottle or not, so if it's something that you can wait and eventually it will become mutter, afilu be'elaf le bottle. Even if it got mixed in with 1,000 times against it, it still won't be bottle. Why? So the simple reason is because you can just wait until the time of the heter will be, so therefore it will not be bottle. So what is Ravashi saying over here? In the Reisha, you're talking about tomei and tar meat from a carbon that got mixed. There never will be any heter for anybody for this. So over there, we're lenient and we say it becomes bottle. And the Sefer, it's speaking about the tar meat of a carbon with the tar meat of a chulin that got mixed. For a kayin, this is mutter. So therefore that falls under the category of a davar sheyesh lematirin. So over there, we're stringent and it's not bottle. But the Gemara now refutes this teretz. Frek the Gemara, as it says the Gemara, v'had Ravashi bedusihi. This answer of Ravashi over here is bedusihi. How do they translate bedusa there?
Fiction.
It's a fiction. Okay, it's in other words, we can't accept this answer. I think some Mefarshim say regarding this is an expression you have in the Gemara a lot of times that the students repeated this in the name of Ravashi. They misunderstood what Ravashi said. So he could have never said such a thing. Why? And the Gemara explains. Laman, for whom are you saying that this meat is considered to be something that's forbidden now and is going to become permitted soon? Ila kayin, are you talking about the kayin himself? Mishra shari, for him it's always permitted to eat this. Both the chulin and the kachim. So there was never an issue for him in the first place. Ili Yisrael, are you talking about using this mixture to allow a Yisrael to eat from it? Salayla Master. It'll remain forbidden for him forever. He's never allowed to eat from the kachim. So how can you consider this to be a davar that one day it's going to become mutter? So this is not a good answer. Ella hadaravashi bedusihi. So this answer is a fiction. Going back now to one of the points of the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. So the Gemara before said that Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is that Truma b'zman hazeh is still min ha-Torah. Fragt the Gemara, b'savar Rabbi Yochanan Truma b'zman hazeh d'oraisa? Does Rabbi Yochanan hold that Truma today is an obligation min ha-Torah? But Vatanya, we learned in the Braise a case where we see that Rabbi Yochanan was actually lenient about this case regarding the Truma b'zman hazeh, and it seems like Rabbi Yochanan holds that it's midrabanan. So what does it say? The case here is as follows. Vatanya, so we learned in the Braise, shtei kupos. You have two baskets. Achas shel chulin, one has chulin in it, and v'achas shel truma, the other has truma in it. And lifneim shtei soim, and in front of these two baskets you have another two buckets. Achas shel chulin, and also one of them is of chulin, v'achas shel truma, and one of them is of truma. Now what happened? V'naflu elu b'toichelu. From these two baskets, the contents of these two baskets fell into the other two buckets. So now, but the problem is we don't know what fell into what. If chulin fell into chulin and truma fell into truma, so then it's perfect. So the chulin you could still eat, and the truma you could still eat, and there's no mixture here. But maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the basket of chulin fell into the bucket of truma, and the basket of truma fell into the bucket of chulin. So what do? So the Braisa says, Harei elu mutarim. We'll take the lenient approach and say that it's allowed. She'ani yomer, and we're going to say, Truma l'tech truma nafla, that probably what happened is the truma fell into truma, v'chulin b'tech chulin naflu, and the chulin fell into chulin. So there's a lenience here. We have this, even though we don't really have anything to prove this, but it's a suffix, and we're lenient over here, and we rely on the fact that probably the mixture, there is no mixture, the chulin fell into chulin, and truma fell into truma. That's the halach of the Braise. Now regarding this Braise, there was a machlokes between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. When do we take this lenient approach? Reish Lakish said regarding this, V'hu sherabu chulin ala truma. Now this is only if in those two buckets that you had, the chulin and the truma, that something fell into them. So over there, in those two buckets, there's more chulin than the truma that would fall into it. So then I say that even if it would be true that the truma did fall into the chulin, but there's more chulin than truma, so it's going to be batal b'rayv. So I'm not only relying on the assumption that the chulin fell into the chulin and the truma fell into the truma, even if the truma did fall into chulin, in addition, now I would have a rayv here. That's Reish Lakish's opinion. Rabbi Yochanan was actually more lenient. He says, no, even if you don't have in this bucket that has chulin more contents of chulin than the truma that would fall into it, still I rely on what it says in the Braise that probably the chulin fell into chulin, the truma fell into truma, and therefore there's no issue. So Rabbi Yochanan was more lenient about this. So now the Gemara explains what the question here is. Bish, Reish Lakish. Now it's understood according to Reish Lakish that's more stringent here. So what did we have before? Reish Lakish's opinion is that Truma b'zman hazeh is only midrabanan. But nevertheless, we can understand why Reish Lakish would be stringent. Kasava, Reish Lakish's opinion is bidrabanan nami, even regarding Truma, which is only midrabanan, ribuyahu debeinan. It's not enough to rely on the fact that the chulin fell into chulin and truma fell into truma. We can't just rely on that assumption. In addition, we'll need a rayv of chulin to be matter this. That's understood. He has that chumrah. But Rabbi Yochanan kashya. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, what's Rabbi Yochanan's opinion? Rabbi Yochanan holds that truma b'zman hazeh is min ha-Torah. If truma b'zman hazeh is min ha-Torah, and here you have a suffix regarding this mixture, how could you rely on this concept of sha'ani omer, that I say that probably the chulin fell into chulin and truma fell into truma? And you don't even have any basis to say such a thing, seemingly. It's just a leniency because of a suffix. And you don't have any bittul b'rayv here either. How would something become bittul without a rayv just because I say that this fell into this? How could you? It's a suffix. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, this is a question. So the Gemara answers, you're right. Hamani Rabbanan hi. Rabbi Yochanan will tell you, this Braise is the opinion of the Rabbanan, and Rabbanan hold that b'zman hazeh Trum is midrabanan. So because Trum is midrabanan, we're lenient in the situation of a suffix. But v'ano the Amri Rabbi Yosi. I that said that Truma B'zman Hazeh is Min HaTorah, I'm following Rabbi Yosi's opinion of the following brisa. The Tanya b'Seder Olam, we learned in the brisa of Seder Olam. These are brises that discuss different things in history. So the brisa there says, it says in the pasuk, Asher Yarshua v'Isecha v'Yirishta. Lashon of a pasuk where it uses a double lashon that your ancestors Yarshan Eretz Yisrael, and it uses again a lashon v'Yirishta. You will inherit it. Why does it use a double lashon? So the reason is because there's Yerusha Shishayna Ushniya. The Yidden come to inherit Eretz Yisrael once and then a second time. Rashi says, when is this? The first time is when the Yidden came into Eretz Yisrael, the first time with Yeshua, to conquer Eretz Yisrael. And then there's the second time, the Yidden came into Eretz Yisrael, when they came to build the second Beis HaMikdash together with Ezra. And that's the Kedusha Shniya, the second time when they sanctified Eretz Yisrael. So after the Yidden left the first time, by the Churban of the first Beis HaMikdash, the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael was annulled. And when they came back the second time, they had to reinstate, they had to bring back the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael a second time. That's why it says a double lashon. So you have once and a second time, Yeshlan. So those are the two times of Yerusha. But the Shlishis, Ein Lehen. Now, when Yidden are going to come back to Eretz Yisrael the third time, when Mashiach comes, we're not going to have to re-sanctify and re-inherit Eretz Yisrael again. Why not? Because the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael that the Yidden established when they came the second time remains forever. The language the Gemara usually uses for this is the Kedusha Shniya is Kitchel L'Shaita, Kitchel Asad Lava. It remains forever. So what does that mean? Even after the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash, the Kedusha remains forever. So if the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael remains forever, so in the produce that grows in Eretz Yisrael, there's an obligation to give Truma Min HaTorah, because the Kedusha stays forever. So this is Rabbi Yosi. This is Rabbi Yosi. There's a big machlokes Rishonim if we paskin this way or not. But the Rambam, I believe, actually paskins like this, that the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael remains today, Min HaTorah, like this opinion of Rabbi Yosi here. Rabbi Yochanan said about this brisa, Man Tana Seder Olam, who's Bechlal the Tana of these brises that are taught in this Seder Olam? Rabbi Yosi. This is Rabbi Yosi's opinion. So that's the source for why Rabbi Yochanan said that Rabbi Yosi holds that the Kedusha remains. There's a long thesis here about this. Thesis brings from different places in Shas that discusses this subject regarding whether Kedusha remains even after the Churban of the second Beis HaMikdash. And Thesis actually says that even though here in the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan is saying that this is Rabbi Yosi's opinion, he doesn't agree really to this. He was saying that this is what Rabbi Yosi holds, but he himself doesn't really hold to this. But other Rishonim say that Rabbi Yochanan does agree to this. So this is a big machlokes who we paskin like. Okay, now the Gemara goes back to another thing that we just mentioned over here regarding this case of the chulin that fell into chulin or truma that fell into truma, and we're not sure what fell into what. Could we be lenient to say that chulin fell into chulin and truma fell into truma, and it would be batal even without a raiv? Or not batal, we rely on this, that chulin fell into chulin and truma fell into truma even without a raiv? Or do you have to have a raiv? Only if there's raiv, then I say it becomes batal. So the Gemara now asks, what did we say before? V'sava Rabbi Yochanan. Is it true what we said before? That Rabbi Yochanan holds b'derabanan loy be'inon ribuya, that if it's truma, which is only midrabanan, so in such a case I could rely that chulin fell into chulin and truma fell into truma, and I do not need a raiv additionally to be mevatel this. But vatanan, here the Gemara brings that we have a Mishnah where I see that regarding something which is a problem midrabanan, I still need raiv. What does the Mishnah say? Regarding a mikveh. Mikveh sheyeshbay arba'im sa mechuvanis. Mikveh has exactly 40 sa, which is the minimum amount of water needed for a mikveh. So what happened? Nasan sa'ah, a person added a sa'ah of non-mikveh water. Or actually Rashi says, the case is he didn't add water, he added grape juice or any other juice into the water, into any other liquids into the mikveh. Now after he added that mashkin, whatever it is, into the mikveh, v'natal sa. He took out one sa of the waters of the mikveh. Kosher. So in this case, it's going to be it's going to be kosher. What's the reason? Because when you put the mashkin that you added into the mikveh, so even though that's puzzle, it's puzzle fluid liquids for the mikveh, but once you added it to a kosher mikveh that has 40 sa, it becomes bottle in the mikveh. So even though now you're removing one sa, So you can say you don't have the amount of 40 saw in the mikveh, but once it becomes bottle in the mikveh, if you remove water afterwards, it's not going to take away from the minimum amount needed for the mikveh. Now Rashi points out that this is only in the order that it says here. That's only if nosan saw and natal saw. If you first poured in, let's say, apple juice into this mikveh, and then you took out water. What if you would have done the other way around? First the person took out a measure of water from the mikveh, and then he poured apple juice into the mikveh, then it would be possible. Because the moment you took out water, it's missing from the minimum amount that the mikveh needs. Now you pour an apple juice, it's not going to help. Apple juice is possible to be mashlim, the full water that's needed for the mikveh. That's the halacha of the Mishnah. So this is Rabbi Yechanan here. What did he say? Ad rubai, that we say, that if you added some juice to the mikveh and then you took out from the water afterwards, that it will still be kosher. Why? Because it becomes bottle in the mikveh. That's only up until raiv. That's only if you took out 19 of the sa'ah of the water of the mikveh. But raiv was still left there. My love, so what does this mean? The Gemara says, don't you think it means the nishtaya ruba? You have to have raiv of the original waters that were there left in the mikveh. So only if you have raiv, then I say that these additional juice or whatever it is that you poured into the mikveh will become bottle there. So what do I see over here? In order for the juice that you poured into the mikveh to become bottle, you have to have raiv. So Rashi here explains that this case of mikveh is considered to be a case where the psul of this mikveh is only midrabanan. Why? So Rashi says, because the whole psul of having waters that are not mikveh waters, mayim she'uvin, which is drawn waters, not mikveh waters, that passes the mikveh, that's only a psul midrabanan. So therefore we're talking about over here a psul midrabanan. And nevertheless, what does it say regarding this psul midrabanan? If it would be half and half, if it would be half kosher rainwater, mikveh water, and then these other liquids that you added, it wouldn't be bottle. It only becomes bottle when it's raiv, when you have raiv of the kosher mikveh water, even though we're talking about a psul, which is only midrabanan. So how could Rabbi Yechanan say before regarding truma midrabanan that if you have chulin that fell into chulin, and you have a suffix if it fell into the chulin of the truma, that even without raiv, it will be bottle? That's the question of the Gemara. Taisus over here, just to be kitzer, Taisus points out that what Rashi says is difficult to understand because Rashi says that when you have drawn water, not rainwater, mayim she'uvim, so that's a psul midrabanan. But the truth is that this Mishnah is not speaking about mayim she'uvim. It's not speaking about drawn water. It's speaking about juice that fell into the mikveh. That's a psul even min atayre. So why is the Gemara saying that this is a psul only midrabanan? That's the question Taisus asks. So Taisus says that the pshat in the Gemara is different. This whole requirement to have 40 sa'ah of mikveh water, that shiur is only a shiur midrabanan. If you have a very, very little thing, let's say you have pins and needles that you want to be mitayed in a mikveh, how large does your mikveh have to be to use such a little item to be mitayed? So Taisus says, minatayri, you don't need 40 sa'ah. You could put it into a mikveh which is less than 40 sa'ah. So the whole requirement, the whole measurement of 40 sa'ah is a measurement midrabanan. That's the basis of the Gemara's question here. Okay, be it as it may, the Gemara answers, the pshat in this statement of Rabbi Yechanan could be different. What he meant is, the loi nishkal rubai. Not that you need to have at least 21 sa'ah that's left in the mikveh. So you have a raiv of the kosher mikveh. What he was saying was that you didn't take out 21. Not that it has to be left 21, but that you didn't take out 21. Meaning if it would be half and half. If you have 20 sa'ah from the original water that was left there, and you took out 20, even if it's half and half, it would still be bottle. Only if you took out more, if you took out 21, then it would not be bottle. So therefore this fits with what Rabbi Yechanan said before. When it comes to a psul midrabanan, even if it's only half and half, I would still say that the mikveh is kosher. Same thing over here regarding the chulin that fell into chulin, or even truma that may have fallen into chulin. Even if it's half and half, it would still be bottle. That's one answer. Another answer is you can't compare this case of the mikveh to the case that we were speaking about before. Why? What were we speaking about before? You had two baskets, one of chulin, one of trumeh, and they both fell into two buckets, one of chulin and one of trumeh. So you don't know which one fell into which. Besides the fact that there's a mixture here, it could be half and half, and it's not batal b'roiv. But in addition, there's another sort to say that maybe the chulin fell into chulin, and maybe the truma fell into truma. So there's two tzadim to be makel here. Number one, even if the chulin fell into the truma and the truma fell into the chulin, so now it's a mixture, and it's a mixture half and half. And when there's a mixture half and half, so it's a suffix. Every time you want to eat something from that basket, it's going to be a suffix, and it's a midrabanon, so there's a reason to be lenient. That's one reason. But there's a second reason to be lenient. Shani yomer. Shani yomer means I can say that maybe the chulin fell into chulin and the truma fell into truma, so therefore there's no issue in the first place. That additional reason to be lenient does not apply by the mikveh. By the mikveh, when you have liquid that falls into the mikveh, so it immediately gets mixed into the entire mikveh. You can't distinguish in the waters of the mikveh that here is the mashka part of the mikveh that's not kosher, and here is the kosher rainwater of the mikveh. It all gets mixed in together. So over here, you have a suffix when you get to this mikveh. If you have half and half, regarding the water of the mikveh. So over here, Rabbi Yechanan says that you still are going to have roiv of kosher water. And therefore, it's not the same thing, b'chlal. Okay, one more thing the Gemara goes back to now, to this machlokes of Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish. And this goes back to the discussion on the Pei Aleph Amud Aleph, where the machlokes between Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish all began regarding an androgynous. And the discussion was whether an androgynous could eat from the chazav v'shayik of a carbon, or could an androgynous eat from trume min atayre. What's the basis of the machlokes between Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish? When it says in the Mishnah that we had before on Pei Aleph Amud Aleph, it said in the Mishnah that Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon say that an androgynous eats truma, and he could allow a bas Yisrael that marries him also to eat truma. So what's the reason for this? Is this because Rabbi Yossi holds that he's 100%, he's definitely a zachar, or is this all a suffix? It's only a suffix that he's a zachar, and therefore only by truma de rabbanon were makel. That was the shaila over here. So it all began with a question regarding androgynous. When it says in the Mishnah that an androgynous is a zachar, according to Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon, does that mean a vadai zachar, or does that mean a suffix zachar? So now the Gemara brings back from the Mishnah itself to ask on this machlokes here. So what did it say in the Mishnah? Tanan, so it said in the Mishnah, androgynous nice. So it said in the Mishnah that an androgynous is allowed to marry a woman. So what do you see from this? It says l'chatchila, an androgynous can go ahead and marry a woman. What does that show? If he can l'chatchila marry a woman, so that means that we treat him 100% like a man, vadai, that he's a man. If so, this proves Rabbi Yechanan's opinion that an androgynous is a vadai zachar. Reish Lakish said an androgynous is only a suffix zachar, and therefore only truma midrabanan ekid. But the Mishnah says naisa, you can l'chatchila get married to a woman. So the Gemara says, Tni, you have to read in the Mishnah, Im Nasa, that it says, now, if he got married to a woman, we are machmir that the marriage took effect, then he'll need a get. So it's only midrabanan. Frag the Gemara, Vaha, Naisa Katani, but that's not what it says in our Mishnah. In the Mishnah it says, Naisa, that he could l'chatchila go ahead and get married to a woman. So the Gemara says, now, according to your reasoning, according to your question that you're asking me, that it says in the Reisha Naisa, right after this in the Sefer it says that this androgynous is not allowed to get married to a woman. So over here, Ela mai nisa diyevet. Doesn't nisa over here in the Sefer, what's the term that the Mishnah uses? Nisa. That bidiyevet, if he got married to a woman, so it uses a term of bidiyevet. That bidiyevet, the marriage, he should not get married to a woman, or that it does not take effect. So the Gemara says, just like in the Sefer, it says the term Nisa, which means B'di'eved, Naisa, Nami, Di'eved. So too in the Reisha, when it says the term Naisa, it doesn't mean L'chatchila, it only means B'di'eved, similar to the Sefer. But the Gemara says on this, no, not necessarily. Amri, so they said, Loi, no, Naisa, L'chatchila mashma. In the Reisha, when it talks about an androgynous getting married to a nekeva, getting married to a woman, it's saying l'chatchila that he can go ahead and get married to a woman. Mashma, avaloi nisa diyevet. But then the term in the Sefer that it uses, the term nisa over there, it's speaking about bidiyevet. That the bidiyevet namiloi, that he shouldn't get married to another woman. That even bidiyevet it doesn't take effect. So therefore this would be a question. Again, this all remains a question on Reish Lakish's opinion. Because over here we see in this Reisha of the Mishnah it says that an androgynous could l'chatchila go and get married to an akeva. So we see that he's considered to be a vadai zachar. Fragt the Gemara, Vaha mediktani seifa. But what does it say after this in the end of the Mishnah? Rabbi Eliezer, the last line of the Mishnah was that Rabbi Eliezer says, Androgenes chayavin olav skila. That if an androgenes gets married to a zachar, he has a relation with another zachar, he's going to be chayiv skila kizachar, like a zachar, that one zachar that had a relation with another zachar. So what do I see from this? Miklal. So from this I understand the Tanakame sfuki misapkele. That the Tanakame has a suffix about this, whether he's a zachar or is an akeva. Only Rabbi Eliezer is the one that said that you're going to be chayiv skila for this. According to the Tanakame, seemingly you will not be chayiv skila. So this proves actually that Rish Lakish is right. That according to the Tanakame, there's a suffix about this androgenes. So the Gemara says, no, that's not true. Sfuki misapkele. Okay, sorry, that was part of the question, sorry. So the Gemara answers, Bein Lamar, both according to the Tanakama and according to Rabbi Eliezer, Mifshat Pshitale. For both of them, we treat a androgenes to be 100% a zachar. So what's the difference between them? But Ikke Beinayo, the difference between the Tanakama and Rabbi Eliezer is Skila Mishnei Mekaimis. Whether he would be Chayiv Skila Mishnei Mekaimis, which means an androgenes is someone that has the organ of a zachar and of an akeva. Now the question is, if he has a relationship with another zachar, so if it's Mishnei Mekaimis, whether from the Aver like a zachar or from the Aver like an akeva, either way, the Tanakama holds he would be Chayiv Skila. So the Marsava, the Tanakama holds Chayav and all of Skila. Either way, you would be Chayiv Skila, because he's 100% a Zachar, Mishnei Mekaimis. But the Rabbi Eliezer is more lenient. Rabbi Eliezer says Kizachar. He's 100% like a Zachar, meaning only if he uses the Aver as a Zachar to have a relation with another Zachar, then he would be Chayiv Skila. But not if it's in the Aver, if like an Akeva, for over there he has a relationship with another Zachar, there he would not be Chayiv Skila.